December 22, 25, 1989, and June 13 and 15, 1990, by a presidential administration of a neo-communist orientation. Crimes which, having been declared as not subject to any statute of limitation, are currently the object of several ongoing trials in the justice system. I evoke these events because under the moral authority of former political prisoners from the period of Stalinist terror and former dissidents from the Ceausescu era, God helped me during my presidential term as the first president of the democratic opposition elected by the vote of 7 million citizens to achieve a national reconciliation between the victims of oppression and their oppressors. This reconciliation achieved despite the presence of representatives of the old regime in both parliaments and the administration was an indispensable condition for the Euro-Atlantic integration of the former communist states of Eastern Europe, Romania among them. However, in Romania, this was the most difficult to achieve because the crimes of the Stalinist period were compounded by the thousands of people who had been killed, wounded, arrested, and tortured between 1989 and 1990. The reconciliation is not being proposed by the victims to their aggressor, had moral significance, and was accompanied by the investiture of truth as a preliminary form of justice, in expectation of the time when the truth as confirmed by judicial courts would, in turn, constitute itself into a historical memory that would integrate into the national consciousness. I choose to recall these events on this Congress because the historical reconciliation that took place in the years 1989-1990 in Eastern Europe, following the collapse of the most criminal regime in world history, that was responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people as a result of peaceful protesters, was based on pedagogy of sufferance. During a difficult period for Romania, I discussed overcoming suffering through reconciliation with Mary McAleese, President of Ireland, from 1997 to 2001. I met her in Dublin in December 1996, a few weeks after my election as president, when I was invited to attend the European Council in Dublin. At the time, Mary McAleese was a professor of law at Trinity College, Dublin, by having previously served as Vice Chancellor of Queen's University of Belfast. We shared a legal background and had pursued similar academic careers. Mary McAleese, born in Belfast, had first-hand experience in the bloody conflict between Irish Catholics and Protestants, and of those between the Irish and the English. She was interested in how Romanians achieved reconciliation, and they had managed to free themselves from communism through a revolution that in just a few days in 1989 resulted in thousands of deaths, thousands of wounded, and thousands of tortured. Moreover, she was also deeply interested in how we were simultaneously able to achieve reconciliation with the Hungarian living both within Romania and in neighboring Hungary after centuries of bloody confrontation. In 1997, she sent me her book, Reconciled Being Love in Chaos, which seeks an answer to the question, can we be friends with God if we are not friends with one another? We are living through a historical period where, against the backdrop of an unexpectedly long-lasting world peace that has now become fragile, wars between states are being replaced by civic, ethnic, racial, and religion wars, profitably for arms manufacturers, or by terrorist acts carried out by an enormous group that glorify the religion of violence. Violence begets violence, and the psychology of fear is being manipulated into a political weapon in today's world. Visionary leaders are being replaced by managers seeking quick profits who act under the tyranny of the ballot box. In the new democracies of freedom without responsibility, human rights, once a shield against dictatorship, have become a religion from which human duties have been eliminated. Is the transformation of the fruits of technological, cultural, and civilizational progress into attacks on the human soul perhaps inevitable? Could a return to Christian values adapted to the realities of contemporary society be a path to salvation? I believe that. At this time, we recall the absolute of faith in order to understand the relative nature of politics, morality, and all realities that are not divine. A reality that must be neither denied nor exalted, but simply placed in their proper context. Putting things in their proper place means respecting both God and the human person. A Christian cannot accept an atheistic politics in which God is denied. This would mean the expulsion of God. At the same time, a Christian cannot accept any totalitarian politics that seeks to turn the individuals into a mere cog in the hands of omnipresent and omnipotent states, because that would mean the humiliation of the individual. What a Christian democratic policy can instead aim for is the creation of a climate of harmony and collaboration among people. For it was written, whoever does not love his brother, whom he sees, both, how can he love God, whom he does not see? For reconciliation after wars and conflicts to be possible, leaders must be able to find a new way of looking at situations considered hopeless, and a new language to persuade reconciliation on a broader level also involve as many people as possible embracing change for their own peace of mind and soul. The question that arises is, where do we each begin the inner journey that focuses on attention of love rather than hate, on understanding rather than divisions, the spiritual orientation that can be bring together in difficult fragments of our lives, transforming us into a being at peace with ourselves? The answer is, let us begin right where we are. Each of us is called to understand the meaning of our own life and, above all, to understand what place we give to God in our soul. Where people are deeply estranged from one another, they are also estranged from God. Lasting change is that which begins within each of us. The culture of peace must begin with the suppression of the human instinct for violence. Every time we give into the impulse to respond to evil with evil, the God within us is defeated and is reborn only when we choose love instead of hatred and revenge. It takes a long journey of understanding to come to know that the most difficult struggle is not with those around us, but with ourselves. In the case of war, this is no longer merely a matter of individual decisions, but the implication of the freedoms, lives, and above all, the death on ever-increasing number of human souls, as he has been seen time and again throughout the history of the world. Following the tradition of secular thought, most international organizations and foundations dedicated to promoting peace and understanding in the world, including UNESCO and the United Nations, seek to find the lowest common denominators on which we can all agree. My conviction is that we must aim much higher. If we want to achieve true peace and understanding among people, we must identify not the lowest common denominations, but rather relate to the highest common denominator, to the God, who inspires us all, regardless of the name we give him in our language or faith. Our shared responsibility in edifying a culture of peace in our communities with global implication is not merely an option, but an urgent duty to ensure that peace not longer only means a respite achieved in the absence of war. In today's society, where differences are used as a pretext for divisions, ecumenism and interfaith dialogue, together with accurate and clear information disseminated by the academic milieu, represent two complementary pillars we require in order to remind ourselves of the true meaning of humanity. Dialogue is no longer a theological or academic luxury, but a shield for all of civil society against radicalization and division. Violence and hatred invoked in the name of God are in fact the greatest denial of his divine grace. No one can deny the Church's millennia-long culpability for inter- and intra-denominated wars, so-called holy wars, the crime of Inquisition, of the persecution of non-Christians. But since the end of the 20th century, that era has definitely come to a close. Over the past 30 years, I have been in direct contact with the leaders of nearly all of the world's major religions and I can testify that from among them I have encountered no denial of the role that religions must play in defending peace and promoting a culture of peace. I believe that the academic community we represent has a direct responsibility towards the Christian community of the East to disseminate and popularize the knowledge of their secular and religious traditions and cultures among today's Western society, which is far too absorbed by its own self-importance. The academic world provides us with the tools of reason and objective analysis to dismantle historical prejudices and better understand the context of the other. We must rediscover the moral values of the Christian communities of the East: compassion, solidarity, and the sacred call to love one's neighbor, which can help us translate the historical and contemporary reality of Eastern Christianity into terms that are intelligible to the public. Those of us who know the Middle East intimately also know that they must engage of this dialogue with our communities continuously in order to help them understand the moral foundation of peace by drawing on the history, manuscripts, traditions, liturgical worship, and ecclesiastic life of the Eastern Christian communities through the lens of our own civilization background, thereby fostering a true spiritual communion that transcends unfounded prejudices. A strong and well-understood spiritual identity never fears dialogue. Those who have a deep understanding of their own culture and faith do not view those of other denominations as a threat, but as partners in jointly facing the great challenges of the world we share. The academic environment is a space where religious leaders and researchers can collaborate to analyze the ethical issues facing today's society. Faith communities can offer young people the opportunity to put humanistic values into practice. The synergy between theory and practice can transform mindsets. Ladies and gentlemen, today passive tolerance is no longer sufficient to ensure the stability of global society in the medium and long term. Humanity needs active and committed cooperation, in which your role as academic and spiritual guides and mentors will prove essential. As we open this event, I would like to remind you of the shared calling of those of us gathered here for coming days of fruitful discussions. That is to demonstrate through the argument of reasons and the power of example that the world's religions need not necessarily be separated by insurmountable dogmatic divides, but can happily work together in major efforts toward peace, understanding, and social cohesion, undertaken at the level of human society as a whole. We can transform our gathering into a long-term commitment to promote the importance of peace in our classroom and to evangelize it within our communities. I invite you at the conclusion of these 5 days of discussion, to join me in launching a declaration for the protection of Christian heritage in the Middle East as an immediate and concrete expression of the academic, ecumenical, communal, and human aspirations and hopes expressed during the proceedings of the World Congress of Syriac Studies and the International Conference on Christian Arabic Studies. I wish you every success in your discussion, and thank you for your attention.
Mr. President, Professor Constantinescu, thank you for your inspiring address and for your enduring commitment and dialogue, and for your support to this international gathering. Romania, on Europe's eastern frontier and deeply rooted into the Byzantine tradition, has long been a bridge of encounter and hospitality, supporting the Christian of the East from Mount Athos to Antioch, Jerusalem, and the other ancient centers of Christianity. These ties reach much deeper into history. In the mid-17th century, Macarius ibn al-Zaim, Patriarch of Antioch, traveled through the Romanian principalities. He composed Al-Majmu al-Latif, preserved only in Arabic, discovered by the Romanian scholar Virgil Cândea in a monastery near Beirut. It is among the earliest chronicles of the Romanian principalities. These connections continued under Prince Constantin Brâncoveanu, when the patriarchs of Antioch found in Bucharest a center of patronage for Arabic printing and Christian scholarship. As the ERC Tip Arabic project, conducted by our colleague Ioana Feodorov, has shown, these exchanges forged lasting bonds that have endured into the modern time. It is my great honor now to introduce the message of His All Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartolomeu, who was unable to honor us with his presence owing to prior commitments.
Your Excellency, President Constantinescu, distinguished representatives of the organizing institutions, dear organizers and participants. We are pleased to greet you through this video message in response to the gracious invitation of His Excellency Professor Emeritus Emil Constantinescu, former President of Romania. You have gathered at the Palace of the Parliament in Bucharest for two renowned international scholarly meetings, the 14th World Congress of Syriac Studies and the 12th International Conference of Christian Arabic Studies. The World Congress of Syriac Studies, with its history extending over more than 5 decades, is convened this year jointly with the International Conference on Christian Arabic Studies under the auspices of the Institute for Advanced Studies in Levant Culture and Civilization, in partnership with the Inter-Parliamentary Assembly on Orthodoxy, the Romanian Academy, and the Parliament of Romania. This conjunction of scholarly inquiry and public concern is both significant and timely. Our world is increasingly and inseparably interconnected. Academic conversations can no longer remain isolated from the wider challenges confronting society, just as political and cultural institutions cannot overlook the knowledge, discernment, and moral responsibility that scholarship can offer. What occurs in one field of human activity inevitably affects many others, while decisions taken within any particular nation frequently bear consequences far beyond its borders. It is precisely within this context that the theme of your joint Congress acquires particular urgency: peace and dialogue for the preservation of literary and material heritage. Throughout the centuries, the ministry of the Ecumenical Patriarchate has been marked by a commitment to reconciliation and peace through encounter and dialogue. This conviction has shaped the theological, liturgical, and spiritual witness of the Mother Church of Constantinople, whether in the pursuit of Christian unity, in raising awareness of the ecological crisis, or in promoting interreligious cooperation and peaceful coexistence within a religiously and culturally diverse, yet frequently troubled and divided humanity. You will be exploring the fascinating and interconnected legacy of the Syriac and Arabic Christian traditions. Yet this heritage is not merely the subject of scholarly inquiry. It remains a living reality, born and preserved by ancient Christian communities throughout the Middle East. The Syriac tradition in particular preserves in its language and literature a precious witness to the Aramaic world of our Lord Jesus Christ, together with an extraordinary treasury of theological, liturgical, literary, and cultural memory. Today, these communities, together with the manuscripts, monasteries, churches, libraries, and the living traditions entrusted to their care, are gravely threatened by conflict, persecution, economic hardship, and forced displacement. Their protection is therefore an urgent moral obligation, both for the continuity of the Christian presence in the Middle East and for the preservation of a spiritual and cultural heritage that belongs to all humanity. The safeguarding of this heritage must consequently include the defense of the right of these ancient communities to remain, worship, and flourish in their ancestral homelands. This responsibility is shared by churches, governments, scholars, cultural institutions, and the international community as a whole. May your deliberations contribute to the advancement of knowledge, the strengthening of dialogue, and a renewed commitment to the protection of the ancient Christian communities and heritage of the Middle East. Upon you all, organizers, scholars, and participants alike, we invoke the abundant grace and blessings of Almighty God, and we wish you every success in your important work.
We are deeply grateful to His Soul Holiness for this inspiring message, which reaffirms the urgent need for peace and stability for Christians of the Middle East, and remind us of our shared responsibility to stand beside them. Institutional ties fostered an enduring Romanian interest in the spiritual heritage of the Near East. In 1840, the historian and politician George Barițiu published his travel essay Călătorie la răsărit, Journey to the East, inspired by Karl Gerolds Der Orient in seinen gegenwärtigen Zustände mit Rückblicken auf die Vergangenheit, dargestellt in einer Reise über Konstantinopel, Kleinasien, Syrien und Palästina. Vienna, 1840. Barițiu emphasized the growing importance of Oriental studies in the 19th century Europe and opened his reflections with Gerolds' striking words. I quote, "Orient or Occident, what immense possibilities lie between these two ideas. Here, a civilization that has reached its summit and, like Saturn, threatens to devour its own children. There, an unlimited development stretching toward a goal perhaps not yet attained." Unquote. Romanian scholars also played a decisive role in cultivating this dialogue around the intellectual heritage of the Christianist. Timotei Cipariu, an eminent Greek Catholic scholar, founder member of the Romanian Academy, and the deputy left behind personal notebooks containing annotations in both Arabic and Syriac. Vasile Radu was the first Romanian theologian to pursue advanced studies in Hebrew and Christian Arabic manuscripts in Paris. His contemporary, Silvestru Octavian Isopescu, one of Romania's pioneer Orientalists, produced the first Romanian translation of the Quran, directly from the original Arabic, published in Cernăuți in 1912. He also translated the commentary of Ephraim the Syrian on the Pentateuch, Joshua, Judges, the books of Samuel and the books of Kings, translated from the original Syriac and published in 1914. Now it's my great pleasure to invite the representative of the President of the Chamber of Deputies, Mr. Ionuț Vulpescu. Mr. Sorin Grindeanu could not be with us today due to the parliamentary session, but we are deeply grateful for his hospitality extended by the Chamber of Deputies. Mr. Ionuț Vulpescu, the floor is yours.
Your Excellency, Mr. President Emil Constantinescu, Your Excellencies, Your Eminences, distinguished guests, it is my greatest honor to welcome you to the Romanian Parliament in my dual capacity as President of the Interparliamentary Assembly on Orthodoxy and as the representative of the President of the Chamber of Deputies of Romania, former Prime Minister Sorin Grindeanu. I extend my warmest congratulations to the driving force behind this Congress, His Excellency President Emil Constantinescu, whose vision brought an event of such global significance to Bucharest and who leads with great wisdom the Institute for Advanced Studies in Levant Culture and Civilization in its mission to foster a culture of peace. As President of the Interparliamentary Assembly on Orthodoxy, I welcome with gratitude and profound emotion the World Congress of Syriac Studies, hosted for the first time in 14 years in Eastern Europe and more specifically in Romania. You may regard this as a hallmark of our institutional and spiritual maturity. We share a common history of martyrs and heroes, of historical witnesses and agents. Common unromanticized perspectives on cosmology and metaphysics, and a shared experience of navigating the centers and peripheries of global power through ecumenical engagement, spiritual union, and patristic heritage. Above all, we share expression of faith, resilience, and hope that a sustainable culture of peace may emerge from our union. Many careful steps have been taken in this direction. Political spheres, irrespective of their ideological orientations, have come to understand that peace-building can become a universal project only through active dialogue with scholars. Social spheres have likewise understood that religious values are not merely negotiated between the private and public realms, but are also fundamental to defining intimacy, personhood, and authenticity. Cultural and academic traditions are increasingly aware that East and West can divide as well as connect, and that there is little value in imposing a secular, unilateral vision of progress, whose pessimistic endpoint may be a world divided into the West and the rest. East and West constitute a twofold, interdependent paradigm through which we may live our faith while remaining true to ourselves. I invite you to keep this in mind as we explore creative and inspired arguments that connect recent scholarly debates with political milestones and social challenges, while drawing attention to the urgent need to protect Christian cultural heritage in the Middle East and to connect it with other parts of the world. Enjoy our stay, and more importantly, take pride in the partnership to which each of you has already contributed. There can be no lasting peace without knowledge. As you may know, humanity's challenges may be distilled into a classical dilemma. How can we do things right while also doing the right things? This conference offers an answer to that question and charts a path towards a credible convergence of political and cultural ambitions, raising awareness of the role of religious diplomacy, dialogue, and cooperation across Christian and non-Christian boundaries. I wholeheartedly thank you for this generous opportunity and wish you a most pleasant stay in Romania. Thank you very much.
We thank you so much to Mr. Vulpescu, former Minister of Culture and a great supporter of the Christian heritage. Thank you for this address. Looking further back, Romanian Oriental Studies had already produced scholars of international stature. Among them was Solomon Schechter, born in Focșani and later a lecturer in Talmudic studies at the University of Cambridge. His pioneering work on the Cairo Geniza from 1896 onwards paved the way for modern scholarship on the medieval Near East. Beyond the Hebrew and Judeo-Arabic texts, the Syriac dimension continues to engage leading scholars, including two who are with us today, George Chiraț of the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton and Bet Marduto, and Anna Cherkashina of Tel Aviv University, whose research on Judeo-Syriac medical texts is opening new perspectives. Syriac heritage also found its way to Romania, not only through books and scholars, but through the preservation of original manuscripts. An extraordinary example dates to 1870, when Dimitrie Alexandru Sturza, economist, historian, future Prime Minister of Romania, educated in Göttingen and Berlin, served as Romania's diplomatic representative in Constantinople. Upon his return to Romania in 1872, he appears to have brought with him what is now recognized as one of the oldest surviving witnesses to the Harklean version of the Syriac Bible, dating from the late 7th or early 8th century. Known today as Oriental Manuscript 403, this manuscript had long been regarded by international scholarship as lost, with no one imagining that it had been transferred to Romania. In 2019, I was able to identify it within the collections of the Romanian Academy and reconstruct its remarkable history. For decades, scholars suspected that additional leaves of this manuscript might still exist elsewhere. Their intuition proved correct. In 1896, the Russian scholar Nikolsky reported that 32 folios from the same manuscript had entered the collection of the Moscow Archaeological Society, becoming the very first Syrian manuscript acquired by that institution. Nikolsky examined the manuscript and published a photograph of one of its leaves. When I encountered this photograph, I immediately recognized that it belonged to the same original manuscript preserved in fragmentary form in Bucharest. Further investigation led us to the State Historical Museum in Moscow, where these missing folios are now preserved under Museum Collection number 3683. By bringing together the three fragments preserved in Bucharest with the 32 folios held in Moscow, it became possible to reconstruct a portion of one of the earliest known witnesses to the Harklean biblical tradition. I now invite the Vice President of the Romanian Academy to give his welcome.
Your Excellency Emil Constantinescu, Your Eminences, Your Excellencies, dear organizers and participants, distinguished guests. I'm deeply honored to address you on behalf of the Romanian Academy with a few words of welcome. My congratulations and feelings of satisfaction, which are shared by my colleagues of the Romanian Academy, are not merely formal. I will now present three pieces of evidence, so material, that demonstrate the connections between Romanian culture and Syrian and Arab Christianity on the one hand, and explain on the other why we are truly delighted that these scholarly events are taking place in Romania's capital. The first piece of evidence is the early Christian basilica of the Syrian type at Mangalia, or Calatis, on the Black Sea coast. This was built by a Syrian architect. This place of worship was in use during the 5th and 6th century and stands as evidence of the influence that Syrian Christianity exerted in ancient Dobruja. Missionary ties with the population of Pontic Dacia were maintained by communities of colonists, soldiers, and merchants. However, their origins can be traced back to the 4th century with when the Syrian bishop Audius and his disciples were exiled by Emperor Constantine the Great to Scythia Minor. These Syrian monks founded monastic communities there, and some of the Scythian monks, such as Dionysius Exiguus and St. John Cassian, after receiving their spiritual training, Dionysius in Syria, Mabuk Monastery, and Cassian in Egypt, became cultural bridges between the East and the West, incorporating elements of Eastern mysticism into Western theology. The Syrian martyrology, the 4th century document, also echoes their presence in ancient Dobruja. It contains the earliest references to Christian saints and martyrs in Scythia Minor, including the names of martyrs from Danube fortresses, such as Noviodunum, XIV-a, such martyrs Zotikos, Atalos, Kamazis, and Philippos. The second piece of evidence is the collection of manuscripts and printed works in Syriac and Arabic found in the libraries of the Romanian Academy in Bucharest and in Cluj-Napoca, which reflect the scholarly interests of some remarkable 19th century Romanian Orientalists. One of them is Timotei Cipariu, a founding member of the Romanian Academy Society and vice president of that society from 1867 to 1872. His collection of manuscripts and rare books of the Romanian Academy Library, Cluj-Napoca branch, includes 187 manuscripts and nearly 1,000 printed works, fundamental texts of Arab, Turkish, Persian culture. The manuscripts comprises 142 volumes in Arabic and 45 in Persian and Turkish or bilingual works. Among the most valuable items in Timotei Cipariu's collection that you can see at the exhibition organized to coincide with these two world conferences in Bucharest are an illustrated copy of Shahnameh, Book of Kings, the Persian epic written by Ferdowsi. In the early 11th century, an undated copy of Na al-Balagha, the Path of Eloquent Speech, a fragment from the collection of letters, moral writings, maxims, and political speeches attributed to Caliph Ali ibn Abi Talib, and an Arabic manuscript from 1720 of the religious poem by Imam al-Bushiri, Kashida al-Burda. The highlight of our exhibition is a manuscript number 403 from the Oriental collection of the Romanian Academy Library, consisting of 6 pages from the Gospel according to Matthew. Finally, the third piece of evidence is the Maronite church in Dimieni, a town located 12 kilometers north of Bucharest. The Maronite church was founded around the hermit Maron at the end of the 4th century and began its activities in Antioch in northern Syria. After the Muslim invasion, the Maronite Christians moved to northern Lebanon, where they remain to this day. Over the past 200 years, there has been a large-scale emigration from this community, so that approximately 10 million Maronites now live in various countries, more than the number living in Lebanon, where they make up 35% of the population. The Maronite church in Dimieni, Otopeni, Bucharest, was consecrated in September 2013 by Cardinal Beshara Boutros Rai. It is the first Maronite place of worship in Romania and in Central and Eastern Europe, where Maronite, Chaldean, and Assyrian Christians from Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq gather for liturgical celebrations. Over 800 Eastern Christians who speak Arabic and Syriac attended the church's consecration. Their numbers have since tripled and continue to grow. Distinguished participants in these two international scientific conferences, on behalf of the Romanian Academy, which is a co-organizer of these academic events, I welcome you and invite you to consider at least one of the three empirical pieces of evidence regarding the connection between Romanian culture and Syrian and Arab Christianity, for in this way, we are confident that the scholarly dialogues you will have in the coming days will be fruitful and open. May it be so. Thank you very much for your attention.
So, Mr. Vice President Wilhelm Danke, thank you for your support and thank you for the Romanian Academy's steadfast support of this scholarship event and for its cooperation on all the organizational issues. The history of these encounters also explains why Romania gradually became a trusted custodian of the spiritual heritage of the Christianist. On such symbol is the Syriac icon of the Mother of God at Ghigiu Monastery, brought to Romania by Bishop Vasil Samaha of Sergiopolis in 1958. It remains one of Romania's most venerated Marian icons and the testimony of the communion with the Patriarchate of Antioch. Romania's encounter with Syriac Christianity has been sustained by the admiration for its spirituality, literature, and saints. Ephraim the Syrian and Isaac the of Nineveh, both are commemorated in the Romanian Orthodox calendar on 28th of January. Their influence has also spread through Romanian theological literature. The writings of Saint Ephraim have become widely accessible through the dedication of Father Ioan Ică Junior, introducing Romanian readers Ephraim's works based on the modern European translations. Perhaps even more remarkable is the reception of Isaac the Syrian. When introducing the Romanian edition of Philokalia, Volume 10, published in 1981, Father Dumitru Stăniloae offered a memorable assessment of Isaac's reception in Romanian culture. Quote, "The words of Saint Isaac the Syrian survive in numerous Romanian manuscripts, proving how diligently they were read through our history." Unquote. This observation is entirely justified. Saint Isaac was already being translated into Romanian as early as 1819 at Neamț Monastery, relying primarily upon the 18th century Greek edition published in Leipzig and probably on Slavonic sources. Today, however, we are very privileged to rediscover him directly through his original Syriac language. It is now my great honor to invite His Grace Nifon, Archbishop of Târgoviște, Honorary Metropolitan and Patriarchal Exarch, representing His Beatitude Daniel, Patriarch of the Romanian Orthodox Church, to deliver his Beatitude's message and blessing.
I have the joy and the honor to present the message of His Beatitude Daniel, Patriarch of the Romanian Orthodox Church. Mr. President Constantinescu, honored audience, the substantial message of His Beatitude, the Patriarch of the Romanian Orthodox Church, is entitled Christian Mission and Evangelical Love in the Service of Peace. Some aspects with regard to the fraternal relations between the Romanian Orthodox Church and the Orthodox Church of Antioch and all the East. The organization in Bucharest of this event of unparalleled significance in this part of Europe represents the joyful opportunity to highlight the fruitful cooperation between the Romanian Orthodox Church and the Orthodox Church of Antioch and all the East, with the aim of fostering a love that is ever ready for sacrifice, following the example and commandment of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. The instability of political and social life in the Eastern Mediterranean region, part of the Ottoman Empire during the 18th century, profoundly affected the life of Christian communities, which were frequently subjected to unjust and discriminatory rule. These circumstances prompted the Eastern Patriarchs to seek support in distant lands, such as small Danubian principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia. Thus, having learned of the generosity of Prince Constantine Brâncoveanu of Wallachia, who extended his support to the entire Eastern Christian population of the Ottoman Empire, to Patriarch Athanasius III, Dabas of Antioch and all the East, he arrived in Bucharest around the year 1700. The shortage of liturgical books in Arabic, keenly felt by the clergy and faithful of the Arabic-speaking Orthodox communities, seriously disrupted ecclesial life, which was also challenged by non-Orthodox proselytizing activities. In this context, in 1701, at the request of Patriarch Athanasius III, and through the financial support of Prince Constantine Brâncoveanu, and the technical expertise of the master printer Antimus of Iberia, Antimiviranu in Romanian, the Greek-Arabic Hieraticon was printed at Znagov Monastery near Bucharest. The following year, in 1702, the Greek-Arabic Herologion was published. These were the first books ever printed in Arabic in the Christian East for the Orthodox Christians of Syria. These publishing initiatives, launched in Wallachia, inaugurated Orthodox Arabic printing in the Levant region, and made a concrete and decisive contribution to the establishment of the first printing press in Syria. Patriarch Athanasius III Dabas returned to Aleppo not only with copies of the books printed in Wallachia, but also with skilled printers and printing equipment, enabling the publication of 9 works in Aleppo between 1706 and 1711. The same situation was also faced by Patriarch Sylvester of Antioch, 1724-1766, who succeeded Athanasius III Dabas on the patriarchal throne. Given that, in 1724, a part of the Antiochian Church entered into communion with Rome, there arose a need to print books that would express the teaching and perspectives of the Antiochian Church faithful to the Byzantine and Constantinopolitan tradition. Like his predecessor, Patriarch Sylvester sought assistance from the Romanian principalities in order to establish a catechetical and apologetic publishing program. Thus, between 1744 and 1747, with the financial support of Princes Ioan and Constantin Mavrocordat, Patriarch Sylvester established 2 Arabic printing presses in Iași and Bucharest, which produced 8 works, Princes Ioan and Constantin Mavrocordat also paid particular attention to the Christians of the Orthodox Church of Antioch by supporting Arabic language schools both in the Levant region and in Iași and Bucharest. As part of the same program of assistance in Arabic-speaking Orthodox Christians, several monasteries were placed under administration of the Patriarch of Antioch, among them the old Saint Spiridon Monastery in Bucharest and the princely monasteries of Saint Nicolae in Botoșani, Moldavia. Another printing press of significant, though short-lived, activity was established by Patriarch Sylvester of Antioch in Beirut, Lebanon, after he returned from Bucharest with the necessary printing equipment. Between 1751 and 1752, he printed several books there, of which 2 titles are known today, a Horologion and a Psalter, Psalms book. The Arabic language books printed with Romanian support opened a new path with unforeseen impact throughout the Levantine world. They contributed to the preservation of Byzantine Christianity in Arabic-speaking lands under the Ottoman rule, fostered the development of the literary Arabic language, and enriched Christian Arabic literature. The wide circulation of these books throughout the Arabic-speaking world is attested today by the presence of the aforementioned volumes and libraries across the Middle East. Following the path of inter-Orthodox cooperation and Christian love, the Romanian Orthodox Church continued in the 20th and 21st centuries to receive with hospitality and joy the visits of Patriarchs of Antioch, Alexander III in 1951 and 54, Theodosius VI in 1959, Elias IV in 1974, and Ignatius IV in 1981 and 1996. On each occasion, the primates of Antioch returned home carrying liturgical objects, books, and vestments produced in the workshops of the Romanian Patriarchate, while the Faculty of Orthodox Theology in Bucharest has consistently granted scholarships to theologians from the whole Levant region. As an expression of evangelical love, in December 2014, during the fraternal visit to Bucharest of His Beatitude John X, Patriarch of Antioch and all the East, the Romanian Patriarchate granted financial assistance to the Patriarch of Antioch and support of Christians in Syria and the Middle East who were being persecuted and were facing hardships. In 2016, at our invitation, His Beatitude John X, Patriarch of Antioch and all the East, His Eminence John Metropolitan of Rustavi, Georgia, celebrated the service of the reconsecration of Antim Monastery in Bucharest, marking the 300th anniversary of the martyrdom of Saint Antimos of Iberia, Metropolitan of Wallachia. Examining several testimonies that attest to the fraternal bonds between the Romanian Orthodox Church and the Orthodox Church of Antioch and all the East, we observe that unity, cooperation, and communion in the spirit of the gospel of love, as lived and proclaimed by Christ the Lord, constitute a solid foundation and a sure path towards strengthening peace and inter-Christian and inter-religious stability in the Middle East. We congratulate the organizers of the 40th edition of the World Congress of Siriace Studies and the 12th edition of the International Conference of Christian Arabic Studies, as well as all the participants who have gathered in great numbers from all over the world. We express our hope that each of you, through your scholarly research and expertise, may become a messenger of peace and a promoter of mutual understanding, not only in the East, but throughout the whole world. Daniel, Patriarch of the Romanian Orthodox Church, thank you very much.
Your Grace, thank you for conveying the inspiring message and the blessing of His Beatitude Daniel. The Romanian engagement with Aramaic heritage also found expression into modern scholarship. In 1980, Daniel Constantin, physician and Oriental scholar, born and educated in Paris, before moving to Romania, published the volume Scripta Aramaica, appearing at the time when Aramaic studies were developed throughout Western Europe. No survey of Romania's scholarly engagement with Syriac Christianity would be complete without mentioning Mircea Eliade, who demonstrated a remarkable familiarity with Syriac Christian symbolism. One of the finest examples appears in his celebrated work, Image and Symbols, published first in French in 1952. In his interpretation of the Hymn of the Pearl, Eliade argues that archetypal symbols never lose their metaphysical depth, even when they acquire economic meanings. The pearl remains far more than a precious object. It becomes a living symbol. I now invite the representative of the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Bucharest, Father Daniel Bulai, to address the Congress. And since we are now in Romania, let us hear also a Romanian message translated into English.
Domnule Președinte, Excelențele voastre, înalt preasfințite, preasfințiile voastre, domnilor miniștri și reprezentanți ai autorităților publice, stimați membri ai comunității academice, distinși invitați, doamnelor și domnilor. În numele Arhidiecezei Romano-Catolice de București, salutăm cu deosebită bucurie desfășurarea în capitala României a celei de-a 14-a ediții a Congresului Mondial de Studii Siriace și a celei de-a 12-a Conferințe Internaționale de Studii Arabe Creștine. Faptul că aceste prestigioase reuniuni academice au loc pentru prima dată în Europa de Est reprezintă o onoare pentru țara noastră și o recunoaștere a vocației sale de spațiu al întâlnirii, al dialogului și al cooperării între culturi și tradiții.
On behalf of the Romanian Catholic Archbishop of Bucharest, we are delighted to welcome the convening in the Romanian's capital city of the 14th World Congress of Syriac Studies and the 12th International Conference on Christian Arabic Studies. The fact that these prestigious academic gatherings are being held in Eastern Europe for the first time is both an honor for our country and a recognition of its vocation as a place of encounter, dialogue, and cooperation among cultures and traditions.
Adresăm felicitările noastre Institutului Levant și tuturor celor care au făcut posibilă organizarea acestui congres la București. În mod deosebit ne exprimăm aprecierea față de domnul președinte, profesor emerit Emil Constantinescu, a cărui viziune și angajare constantă în promovarea culturii dialogului, a păcii și a cooperării internaționale, au contribuit în mod decisiv la aducerea acestui prestigios eveniment în România. Această inițiativă reprezintă o contribuție valoroasă la afirmarea țării noastre ca loc al întâlnirii dintre tradiții, culturi și comunități academice din întreaga lume.
We extend our heartfelt congratulations to the Levant Institute and to all those who made the organization of this Congress in Bucharest possible. In particular, we wish to express our profound appreciation to its president, Professor Emil Constantinescu, whose vision and steadfast commitment to promoting a culture of peace, dialogue, and international cooperation have played a decisive role in bringing this distinguished event to Romania. This initiative represents a valuable contribution to affirming our country's role as a meeting place of tradition, cultures, and academic communities from around the world.
Patrimoniul siriac și arab creștin constituie o parte esențială a memoriei vii a Bisericii Universale. Cercetarea, conservarea și promovarea acestuia nu reprezintă doar un demers academic de înaltă ținută, ci și o responsabilitate comună față de generațiile viitoare. Într-o lume marcată de tensiuni și fragmentări, aprofundarea rădăcinilor comune ale credinței și ale culturii poate deveni un autentic izvor de reconciliere și de speranță.
The Syriac and Christian Arabic heritage constitutes an essential part of the living memory of the Universal Church. Its study, preservation, and promotion are not only scholarly pursuits of the highest caliber, but also shared responsibility towards future generations. In a world marked by tension and fragmentation, a deeper understanding of the common roots of our faith and culture can become a genuine source of reconciliation and hope.
Tema acestei ediții, pacea și dialogul, premise pentru protejarea patrimoniului material și spiritual, exprimă convingerea că adevărata pace se clădește prin cunoaștere reciprocă, respect și colaborare sinceră. În acest spirit, Arhidieceza Romano-Catolică de București se bucură să fie partener al acestui eveniment și își reafirmă disponibilitatea de a susține inițiative care promovează dialogul dintre biserici, dintre comunități și dintre popoare în slujba binelui comun.
The theme of this year's edition expresses the conviction that true peace is built upon mutual understanding, respect, and sincere cooperation. In this spirit, the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Bucharest is honored to be a partner in this event and reaffirm its commitment to supporting initiatives that foster dialogue among churches, communities, and peoples in the service of the common good.
Transmitem tuturor participanților aprecierea și urările noastre de succes în lucrările Congresului, cu speranța ca reflexiile și schimburile academice din aceste zile să contribuie la consolidarea păcii, la protejarea patrimoniului spiritual al creștinătății și la întărirea legăturilor de prietenie și colaborare între oameni de știință, instituții academice și comunități ecleziale din întreaga lume.
We extend to all participants our warmest wishes for a successful and fruitful Congress. It is our hope that the reflections and academic exchanges taking place over these days will contribute to the strengthening of peace, the safeguarding of Christianity's spiritual heritage, and the deepening of bonds of friendship and cooperation among scholars, academic institutions, and ecclesiastical communities throughout the world.
Semnează Excelența sa Înalt Preasfințitul Aurel Percă, Arhiepiscop Mitropolit de București. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your inspiring message and for representing His Grace Archbishop Aurel Percă today. The history we have briefly recalled today leads us to an important conclusion. The international community of Syriac and Christian Arabic scholars has not brought these fields to Romania. Rather, it has restored it to its rightful place. Over the next 5 days, Bucharest will become one of the world's principal centers for Syriac and Christian Arabic studies. More than 400 scholars, representing 169 universities from over 35 countries, have gathered here to share their commitment to preserving these spiritual traditions. We are especially honored by the presence of His Holiness Mar Ava III, Catholicos Patriarch of the Assyrian Church of the East, together with distinguished bishops representing the ancient churches of the Middle East. It is now my profound honor to invite His Holiness Mar Ava III, Catholicos Patriarch of the Assyrian Church of the East, to address this distinguished assembly. Your Holiness, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Your Eminences, Your Excellencies, Your Graces, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the Government of Romania, Reverend Fathers and monastics, esteemed scholars and participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great joy, together with my delegation of bishops and scholars from the Assyrian Church of the East, to present these words at the opening of this auspicious 14th World Congress of Syriac Studies, the Symposium Syriacum, and the 12th Conference of Christian Arabic Studies, which is being held conjointly under the auspices of the Romanian Academy and the Institute for Advanced Studies in Levant Culture and Civilization, or Levant Culture and Peace. Together with the esteemed Romanian Parliament, which seat is the venue for the convocation of this Congress. At the outset, I would like to express my deep gratitude to all of the organizers for their exceedingly kind invitation. In particular, I would like to put on record my profound thanks to Professor Dr. Cătălin Ștefan Popa, the chair of this year's Congress, together with His Excellency Dr. Emil Constantinescu, former President of Romania and President of the Scientific Council. Friends, Christianity was born in the Middle East over 2 millennia ago, and Christian communities have remained part of the region's religious, cultural, and social life ever since. Cities such as Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Antioch, Damascus, Edessa, and Seleucia Ctesiphon played foundational roles in the development of Christian theology, worship, and ecclesiastical organization. The region is still home to a remarkable diversity of Christian traditions, including Assyrians, Chaldeans, Syriacs, Armenians, Maronites, Melkites, Eastern Orthodox Christians, Roman Catholic Christians, Protestants, and others. These communities should not be understood simply as religious minorities or as foreign groups living within predominantly Muslim societies. They are indigenous peoples and citizens whose languages, institutions, monasteries, schools, hospitals, and intellectual traditions have contributed significantly to the development of the Middle East. Nevertheless, their presence has become increasingly fragile. Armed conflict, forced displacement, political instability, economic decline, discrimination, and continuing emigration have reduced many historic Christian communities today. According to the Pew Research Center, Christians represented approximately 3% of the population of the Middle East and North Africa in 2020. Although their absolute number was estimated at approximately 13 million, their share of the region's population declined between 2010 and 2020, partly due to migration and slower population growth. The future of Middle Eastern Christianity will therefore depend on more than the physical protection of churches and institutions. It will require equal citizenship, the rule of law, economic opportunity, responsible church leadership, interreligious cooperation, and meaningful partnerships with the Christian diaspora. has the title of my presentation or my talk, The Contemporary Challenges and Future Perspectives of Christian Communities in the Middle East. The most valuable challenge facing Middle Eastern Christians is the continuing effect of war and political violence. Christians have suffered, alongside with Muslims, Yazidis, Mandaeans, Druze, and other communities, during various periods of conflict and violence in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and elsewhere. However, Christians can be especially vulnerable because they are numerically smaller, often lack political or military power, and are concentrated in areas contested by stronger political forces. The rise of the Islamic State created an existential crisis for the ancient Christian communities of Iraq and Syria. In 2014, Christian families were driven from Mosul and various towns across the Nineveh Plains. Churches, monasteries, homes, manuscripts, cultural and religious sites were damaged, destroyed, or confiscated. Some almost 150,000 Christians from Mosul and the villages of the Nineveh Plains took refuge overnight in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. Even after the military defeat of the Islamic State at the end of 2017, many families, almost all families, have hesitated to return to their homes because of insecurity, militia influence, political competition, unemployment, inadequate social services, and disputes concerning land and property. Reports on Iraq continue to identify harassment, property misappropriation, political sectarianism, and the influence of armed groups as serious threats to Christians and other vulnerable religious minorities. Migration is intricately connected to insecurity, but it is also driven by unemployment, corruption, weak public services, educational concerns, and the desire to provide children with a more stable future. When one family member becomes established in Europe, North America, or Australia, their other relatives will soon follow. Over time, temporary migration becomes permanent settlement outside of the homeland. The departure of educated young Christians creates a particularly fundamental problem. Doctors, engineers, business owners, teachers, clergy, and other professionals reply to local communities. Their departure weakens Christian institutions and reduces the number of young adults available to create families, lead parishes, manage schools, and participate in public life. Lebanon, for example, demonstrates this difficulty clearly. Pew Research Center estimates that the Christian share, for example, of Lebanon's population has declined to approximately 28% by 2020, with both migration and the changing composition of the resident population contributing to this decline. However, migration should not be described only as abandonment or failure. Many people leave because remaining has become unsafe or economically impossible. The diaspora can also become a source of financial assistance, education, and advocacy, and professional expertise. The important question is whether the relationship between immigrants and their countries of origin can be transformed from a simple brain drain into a long-term partnership. The World Council of Churches, for example, has emphasized that migrants possess resilience, skills, and resources, and they can contribute to both their host societies and to their communities of origin. Discrimination and unequal citizenship. Another major challenge in the gap between constitutional promises and the daily experience is the daily experience of citizenship. Several Middle Eastern constitutions formally recognize religious freedom or equality before the law. But access to government jobs, military service, education, political representation, property, and legal protection could be conditional on religious identity and affiliation. laws concerning religious conversion, personal status, marriage, child custody, and the forced Islamization of minors, and inheritance laws in some other countries create difficult legal situations for Christians, especially converts and those who are members of unrecognized churches. Sectarian, quota-based political systems can provide a minimum representation, but they can also transform religious communities into political blocs controlled by stronger leaders. In such systems, Christians may receive symbolic offices without possessing genuine influence over national decisions. Christian leaders in the region have repeatedly emphasized that Christians should participate as equal citizens rather than exist as protected communities separated from their societies. Equal citizenship means that the same law ought to protect a Christian, just as it protects a Muslim, a Yazidi, or a Jew, or a non-believer without discrimination. Economic and institutional pressures. Economic collapse can be as destructive to a community as direct persecution. When people cannot find employment, purchase homes, receive medical treatment, or educate their children, they are unlikely to remain simply because their ancestors lived in a particular place. Church institutions are often expected to respond when and where governments fail. Christian schools educate students from different religious backgrounds. Hospitals treat the general population without distinction of religion, and charitable organizations provide food, housing, and medical assistance. These services demonstrate the continuing importance of Christian communities beyond their numerical size. The World Council of Churches notes that Christian institutions contribute to education, healthcare, culture, humanitarian relief, women's development, and child protection across the Middle East region. The goal should be cooperation between churches, civil society, governments, and international organizations to rebuild institutions that serve every citizen. Internal challenges within Christian communities. Not every difficulty comes from outside of the churches, unfortunately. Middle Eastern Christianity is divided among numerous ecclesiastical traditions, jurisdictions, languages, calendars, and political loyalties. This diversity is spiritually and culturally valuable, but rivalry can weaken the Christian public voice. Sometimes cooperation is not possible because of competition over authority, property, international support, and political representation. Our churches in the Middle East also need to be more sensitive to the concerns of young people, the youth. Younger Christians may feel that church leadership often speaks frequently about preserving the past, but less frequently about employment, education, mental health, family life, technology, political participation, and social justice. Future perspectives. Though these challenges may be daunting, the advent of a Christianity-free Middle East is not a foregone conclusion. Several paths can strengthen its future. First, Christian security must be connected to the security and dignity of every citizen without distinction. Christians cannot build a peaceful future without non-Christians or their other religious neighbors. The support of constitutional government, independent courts, freedom of conscience, and impartial law enforcement will be stronger than sectarian militias or political patronage. Second, reconstruction should be focused on sustainable communities rather than on buildings. Restoring a church is important, but families need homes, schools, clinics, electricity, transportation, jobs, and legal protection for their property. Foreign aid should not breed long-term dependency, but empower local entrepreneurs and grassroots development in the home country. Third, the ecumenical and interreligious cooperation must be broadened and strengthened. Christian churches can work together in educational institutions, in humanitarian initiatives, even in theological resources and advocacy efforts, while respecting their doctrinal or their ecclesiastical differences. Fourth, the diaspora has to be conceived as part of the living Middle Eastern Christian communities. Diaspora professionals may support scholarships, digital education, medical programs, cultural preservation, and responsible investment. But diaspora organizations should also listen to the local communities rather than impose political agendas upon them from abroad. Finally, Christian identity must be seen as both ancient and contemporary. Syriac and other ancient Christian traditions must be preserved, but preservation must not become isolation. Christians can remain faithful to their faith heritage and the traditions of their church while participating fully in modern education, technology, culture, civil society, and even politics. And I conclude, Christian communities in the Middle East face a combination of violence, displacement, demographic decline, legal discrimination, economic instability, and internal institutional weaknesses to varying degrees. Their future depends on whether the Middle Eastern societies can develop systems based on citizenship, justice, religious freedom, and the impartial rule of law. The churches in the Middle East also carry a heavy responsibility for their own renewal. They must cooperate across denominational boundaries, empowering young people and women, strengthening accountable institutions, and serving the entire society, and build constructive relationships with the diaspora. Christians have survived in the Middle East not simply by separating themselves from others, but by contributing to the civilizations, languages, education, medicine, and public life of their homelands. The preservation of the Christian presence in the Middle East, friends, is therefore not only a Christian concern, and it should not be only a Christian concern. It is a concern of the entire world community. It is a test of whether the Middle East can remain a region of religious and cultural plurality, a Middle East in which Christians can live freely and participate as equal citizens will also be a safer and more dignified home for every religious community. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Your Holiness. Your Holiness, thank you for your profound and inspiring address. Your presence among us is a great blessing and a great honor for this Congress. The diversity of the Syriac churches are a profound source of inspiration for living together, praying together, and building together. In the same spirit of dialogue, His Holiness Moran Mor Ignatius Afrem II, Patriarch of the Syriac Orthodox Church of Antioch and all the East, unable to be with us today because of his pastoral responsibilities, has graciously sent us a special video message, which I now have the pleasure of inviting you to watch.
لاحي وحوثو دبلو موذو هونو بريخو أربعة سيرويو دوغوية سريوية بمدينة بوخارست رومانيا وريبو توديون الخون مقربينان على فيليوثو لو أينويتو بحقل سيويوثو محاويتون والطيموثو دابوهو ثانغوليتون المريو ألوهو ديل متكشفينان دغرو شمايون الخون نفراع وبيامينوثو آمينو إيث نسايا. We extend our heartfelt greetings to you all on the occasion of the 14th World Congress of Syriac Studies, Symposium Syriacum, and the 12th Conference of Christian Arabic Studies held in the historic city of Bucharest. We offer our sincere gratitude to the Romanian Academy, the Institute for Advanced Studies in Levant Culture and Civilization, the scientific and organizing committees, and all the institutions and individuals whose dedication has made this distinguished gathering possible. We also offer our appreciation to Dr. Katalin Stefar Popa, President of the Congress, together with the scholars, partners, and public authorities who have contributed to this important international event. We are immensely pleased to see this Congress convened for the first time in Romania and in Southeastern Europe. Bucharest, with its rich Christian and cultural heritage, is a fitting place for scholars, students, and researchers to meet in mutual respect, scholarly exchange, and cooperation. The theme of this Congress, Peace and Dialogue for the Preservation of Literary and Material Heritage, expresses a responsibility shared by all. Heritage is not merely the object of academic study, it bears the memory, identity, and spiritual legacy of peoples and communities, which can be a source of education for our generation and future ones in appreciating each other's heritage and learning from each other. Peace is the condition in which communities can live securely and heritage can endure. Where conflict prevails, communities are displaced, archives and manuscripts are endangered, and churches, monasteries, libraries, cemeteries, and historical sites face irreparable loss. Dialogue is likewise indispensable among churches, scholars, academic institutions, public authorities, cultures, and religious communities. True dialogue honors the integrity of each tradition while building mutual understanding, trust, and responsible cooperation. Syriac and Christian Arabic heritage is a living inheritance. It's expressed in faith and liturgy, theology and biblical interpretation, literature and poetry, philosophy and intellectual life, as well as in the historical memory of Christian communities. Across the centuries, Syriac-speaking and Arabic-speaking Christians preserved, interpreted, translated, and transmitted theological, philosophical, scientific, literary, and historical learning, enriching the wider intellectual life of the Mediterranean and Near Eastern worlds. This inheritance belongs to humanity, yet it is inseparable from the communities that have faithfully carried it from generation to generation. Manuscripts and monuments, living languages and sacred music, libraries and liturgical traditions, churches and monasteries all form one sacred and interconnected heritage. For this reason, the preparation of critical editions, cataloging, conservation, digitization, archaeological and epigraphic research, and international scholarly cooperation are indispensable. They preserve historical memory and make this heritage available to future generations. We therefore encourage every effort to protect, study, digitize, and make accessible the manuscripts and cultural treasures of the Syriac and Christian Arabic traditions. We also renew our appeal for sustained support for Christian communities in the Middle East so that they may remain in their ancestral homeland and continue their spiritual, cultural, and civic witness. The Syriac Orthodox Church of Antioch remains committed to cooperation with scholars, churches, academics, institutions, cultural organizations, and all people of goodwill in preserving and promoting this shared inheritance. The participation of the Patriarchal Department of Syriac Studies in this symposium is a sign of our great interest in the proceedings of your gathering. We pray that this Congress may deepen scholarly exchange, strengthen cooperation among institutions and researchers, and inspire a new generation to serve the Syriac and Christian Arabic traditions for the benefit of scholarship, the Church, and humanity. May our Lord God bless the organizers, speakers, participants, and all who have contributed to this Congress. May He grant you wisdom in your deliberations and lasting fruit in your work for the preservation of our shared heritage. May God bless you all. Tawdi Say.
We are very deeply grateful to His Holiness for this timely appeal calling for continued support for the Christians of the Middle East. A highlight of the Congress will be our concluding plenary session on the protection of the Christian cultural heritage of the Middle East and the need of peace and sustainable development in safeguarding this legacy. I now invite the representative of the Department for Sustainable Development of the Government of Romania, Mr. Laszlo Borbeli, to deliver a brief greeting.
Mr. President Constantinescu, Excellencies, Eminences, dear guests, dear colleagues, I have a very good written speech here, but based on very inspirative speeches before, I will share with you some thoughts of mine regarding sustainable life, regarding how we are looking to our life, based on my humble experience. And thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Professor Emil Constantinescu and his team, especially Mr. Professor Cătălin Ștefan Popa, for his wonderful job to prepare this unique and exceptional event. I faced sustainable development on a stage of being chair of the CSD19, the Committee for Sustainable Development at United Nations in 2010. And for 1 year, we discussed 5 very important declarations about technical issues. But I was surprised about how passionate they are in dialogue, how empathic, how with positive energy we can discuss different countries, different religions, different people. And in 2015, by consensus, and it's a beautiful word, consensus, we have the Agenda 2030, which is in this moment a document which is the base of sustainable development in all of the world. And it was very important to find a way for the society to understand these technical issues. First, we need leadership. Second, of course, to have an interinstitutional framework which is functioning. And we established since 2017, I am a state councillor near the Prime Minister's office, to establish an interinstitutional framework. And of course, maybe the most important, how the relationship with the society, with all the stakeholders in the society. So for us, it was a big challenge. Of course, after 9 years, we are very proud that we are recognized by OECD, United Nations, like regional hub in Romania because of implementation of Agenda 2030. It's very technical, but the base are the human relationship. It's the most important issue that we have to work on this, and the basic value provided by all the religions, and of course culture. And it's very surprising that we have 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, in Agenda 2030. We have no Sustainable Development Goal for culture. So we revise now our strategy, and I hope that I will convince the Romanian government to have a proposal post-2030 to have a different SDG for culture. Of course, culture is everywhere, but we need this kind, because culture, it means resilience, it means education, it means communities, sustainable communities. And in Romania, we, based on our experience on how we need more professional skills, we have in this moment, it's unique in Europe, 2,300 experts in sustainable development in public administration. We have hubs in each ministry, and we have to localize this. It's an education, it's a never-ending story. It's about our life, how we pretend to have our life more sustainable, more healthy, and this is our mission, because we have a mission, all of us. Of course, I have to say that Romania is a wonderful country with 5 ecosystems. Yes, it's unique in Europe. We have Pontiac, we have steppe near Pontiac, which is unique. We have continental, we have Pannonic, and we have Alpine. We have 19 minorities in the parliament. I belong to the Hungarian minority, and it's a special case that we have our voice in the Romanian parliament. Different cultures, different religions, different parts of Romania. We have a very proud of regional background of us. So we have to use this. And of course, we are partners for Friday. Finally, I would like to say, because former speakers, previous speakers mentioned this, but it's very important. There are 3 basic documents. There are more, of course. But there are 3 basic documents about Rio Plus 20, about the principles of sustainability. The second is provided in 2009 about happiness and basic principles of happiness. And thirdly, the Vatican has a very good and very well-prepared document about our environment and the principles of sustainable development. One word is common in these 3 documents: love. Love, we have to fight with love against hate, and we have to be change makers of the society for a more sustainable world. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your thoughtful remarks, Mr. Bolbeli. Now I would like to convey the greetings as sent by the State Secretary for Religious Affairs, currently on an official visit to the United States. We are now behind the time, but as always happens during the opening ceremonies, I propose to avoid time pressure and to use 20 minutes from the coffee break, and then to accommodate the schedule until the lunch break. Now it is my great pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, to invite our first keynote speaker, Professor Kevin Van Bladel of Yale University, one of the world's leading authorities on the linguistic history of the Near East. Since 2017, Professor Van Bladel has served as Professor of Near East Languages and Civilization, Professor of the Classical Near East, and Director of Graduate Studies at Yale University. Previously, he was Associate Professor and Chair of the Near East Languages and Cultures at the Ohio State University, and before that, he served at the University of Southeastern California. Professor Van Bladel has taught an extraordinary range of ancient languages, including Classical Arabic, Syriac, Greek, Avestan, Old Persian, Middle Persian, Early New Persian, and many other Indo-European linguistics. At Yale, his teaching focuses primarily on Classical Arabic and Ancient Persian, and he also leads a Syriac reading group. Professor Van Bladel is the author of 4 books published by leading academic presses, including Oxford University Press, Cambridge, Brill, and American Oriental Society. The title of today's lecture is Demythologizing Syria. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Professor Kevin Van Bladel. Professor, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. I have an idea. Let's start, if you wish, and your knees and legs are willing, stand up for about 10 seconds. I mean that, if you feel inclined, stand up. Just let the energy back into your body. Okay. That's all. Thank you. It's not for any honorary purpose. It's just for your attention. So, as I lay in my bed at the hostel of the Patriarchate, not sleeping because of the time zone difference last night, I was inspired by thoughts of the themes of this conference, and first among those is peace. I'm going to omit those thoughts because we've heard plentiful words, both eloquent and wise, inspiring of goodwill towards all of humanity and peace for all. I trust that we're all together with those agenda. I want to say very briefly now, because time is constrained, hearty thanks to all of you for attending, for all the support of so many organizations, the moral and financial support of so many organizations and churches, to the custodians here of the Palace of the Parliament, and especially to Katalin Stefan Popa and his team. If we could maybe give them, just for the first time in this conference, a round of applause for their warm hospitality and the organization. For me, this is a special honor too. I was just looking over the record of my career. I gave 99 conference and invited lecture presentations. This is my 100th within the first 24 hours of arriving in Romania. Here I stand in this beautiful building, which makes each one of us very small. So anyway, thank you for being here, and thank you for your attention. Talking about demythologizing Syriac addresses the second theme of this conference, cultural heritage preservation. By demythologizing, I actually have to say a word of explanation about what this and what it means. Let me start by just saying that I deem it of utmost importance when we consider cultural heritage preservation to think about how we think about these heritages, right? What are the terms that we use? What are the terms by which we define these heritages? So demythologizing languages, it's not a mystical word. It just means analyzing and correcting unsupported concepts and beliefs about specific languages and about languages in general. Most people harbor what we can call myths, false concepts about languages and how they work, and sometimes we can get stuck in errors based on those mistaken concepts. So when I talk about language myths, I mean of a general kind. Some people think that some languages are better than others, for example, or that languages decay over time, or that older languages are more pure, or specific examples. When I was a student in classics, I often heard classics professors imply that ancient Greek language is so complex in its grammar, in its grammatical inflection, that it was destined to become the medium for the birth medium of philosophy. And that's not true. In fact, philosophy of all kinds can be conveyed in any language. Or in another area of my research, people sometimes say that Persian is the language that ties an abstracted Iranian civilization together from its ancient origins until today. That's also not true, of course. Regardless of what we mean by Iranian civilization, there are many, many languages that were spoken in that putative civilization. I wanted to draw attention, since we're talking about Siriace, to the recent dissertation of Dr. Hannah Stork, in which she studies the language ideologies of early and medieval Syriac authors and how the traditional scholars from those periods, from, say, the 5th century to, in fact, until today, have idealized the Syriac language. It's a sympathetic and powerful dissertation, and I hope that she will publish it soon in a book. I don't want to steal her work here, though. I was a reader of this dissertation, but I hope you'll be on the lookout for it. So my concern is linguistic history, which is not the same thing as historical linguistics, not the same thing as sociolinguistics, not the same thing as contact linguistics, fields that some of you work in and with. It focuses on, linguistic history is the history of languages told through the history of their speakers, as far as the languages are concerned. And this is a critical distinction to make, right? Linguistic history focuses on human agency in language use. It focuses on language shift. This is something that we're all talking about here in this conference if we're talking about linguistic heritages. Language shift is not when a language changes per se, but it's intergenerationally. This, the syndrome wherein, for example, a group of people who speak one language, language A, moves to a new place, right? And their children grow up with language A, but also language B, the language of this new place, and their children may grow up without language A, the language of their grandparents, right? So it's an intergenerational change. Historians tend to talk about the spread of languages. This is a misleading concept. It's a wrong way to go about it. Languages do not have agency. Humans have agency in this process. When we talk about languages in contact, for example, we know that there are many words from ancient Greek that were adopted in Syriac, right? And there are many words in Arabic, as used by Christians, adopted from Syriac. It's human beings who transfer words and features from one language to another. Languages themselves, as abstractions, do not come into contact. One of my contentions in promoting linguistic history is that if we lose track of human agency in these processes, we end up actually making big mistakes, analytical mistakes, historical mistakes. If you're interested in my latest take on linguistic history, I invite you to see this book that I just published about ancient Persian. You may think that's just not relevant to a conference on Syriac and Christian Arabic, but in fact it is, because therein I lay out a method for doing linguistic history which should apply to any language in the type of scenario that I just was referring to. I want to point out, though, a book that probably several of you at least have studied, I think a masterful book here by my colleague Aaron Michael Butts, Language Change in the Wake of Empire, which shows similarly how Syriac took shape as a language. Yeah. Oh, I beg your pardon here. I'm not hooked up the same way. So, apologies for that, yeah. Thanks, Professor Popa. Here we go. Sorry about that. So this was the book I was just referring to. Now, as I was just saying, linguistic history has principles and has ramifications for how we do history. Languages do not have agency or capabilities. People do, and this is critical. Languages do not spread. They are acquired and adopted in specific conditions. So when we're talking about linguistic heritages, this is where the action is. It's with people and the choices that they make, not an abstract Syriac floating through time or moving across space as weather maps portray air fronts moving north or south. Disembodied languages do not come into contact. I would prefer, in fact, to speak about transfer linguistics rather than contact linguistics. And this is important now, especially for what I'm going to say next, that languages don't belong to religions. People do, and I'm going to illustrate this with 3 examples. So, first of all, Arabic. One will often hear today, well, Arabic is the language of Islam. And I don't need to preach to this choir here about that Arabic is also the language of Christians, right? It has been the language of non-Muslims since the advent of Islam. right? The participants in the conquests of the 7th centuries and thereafter, who created the first Islamic state, many of them converted to Islam without speaking Arabic yet, or they spoke it as non-native speakers. It's still the same today. Arabic is not the language of Islam. So, despite this that one often hears, it is a linguistic ideology or a language myth that we can't accept. Now, one can insist that, well, Arabic is the language of the Quran, and that is true, but not in translation. Probably most Muslims in the world read the Quran actually in translation. As we translate texts from one language to another, those texts cease to belong to one language. So when we talk about Christian Arabic, sometimes it even surprises me. Christian Arabic as opposed to what? We don't say Muslim Arabic, we just say Arabic, right? So these are the kinds of assumptions that we have in the ways that we use language. It's the kind of thing we see in another field. My colleagues in medieval studies, when they talk about medieval studies, they almost always just mean Western Europe, Western European medieval studies. If you want to talk about medieval studies in other areas, you have to specify, well, the medieval Middle East or something like that, right? Because certain words just have these associations, and Arabic is one of those. People associate it with Islam, yet there have always been, since the advent of Islam, Arabic speakers who are Christian. Another example is this idea of Judeo-languages, right? There's an industry in scholarship about the different kinds of so-called Jewish languages. It may surprise you to know that despite the many scholars of these so-called Jewish languages, there is no definition of a Jewish language out there. Some have said that it means any language with a Hebrew lexical component. But I have the chutzpah to say that that's not an adequate definition. There are lots of languages that have Hebrew lexical components that are not used by Jews. Some loosely will say, well, a Judeo language is any language used by Jews, which has the strange outcome that when I speak English, not being a Jew, not being a Jewish person, it's not Judeo-English, but when I speak with a Jewish colleague, then his English is Judeo-English. Yet there are scholars who talk about Judeo-English as a distinct kind of English. Well, we can talk more about that perhaps another time. Others say that, like Spolsky, that a Jewish language is any language in a diglossic situation with Hebrew. I won't linger on the definition of diglossia. I think this is a misuse of the term diglossia for those who do know about it. But suffice it to say that this definition eliminates Hebrew from being a Jewish language, right? Which is something that actually the author discusses. In the end, we tend to find statements like those of Maman from 2021, that the identification of any Jewish language is an easy and intuitive task. Well, I don't think it is. I don't know what that means to say a Jewish language. We're really talking about languages which have different social circumstances that have given them their shape. It's not a Jewish religion, but it's the social patterns of Jewish cohabitation, of the community boundaries, or the lack of community boundaries. You could say cosmopolitanism, that makes languages, that puts them in a position to converge or not to converge, to evolve in distinct, peculiar ways or not. So also, Syriac is supposed to be a Christian language. And this is an example also that I would contest. Just as no language is a Jewish language, just as Arabic is not the language of Islam and of no other culture or religion, so also Syriac is not. And this problem comes at us from different angles. Some scholars don't understand that Syriac is Aramaic at all. This is a surprisingly common mistake, especially among non-Syriacists. I don't want to pick on Ramsay McMullen, the excellent historian here, with a quotation that he wrote, but he, in one of his books, The Second Church, he noted that when speaking about Dura Europos, an ancient city on the Euphrates, Latin, Syriac, Aramaic, and Palmyrene were all spoken in Dura, though Greek prevailed. Well, 3 of those 4 are all just Aramaic, right? They were mutually comprehensible languages in that time. So the idea that Syriac is a Christian language and Aramaic is a Jewish language is a problem that we have to face, and we really do need to be precise in the way we talk and to understand that these are misnomers. So Syriac did not and does not belong to Christianity, and I have to qualify that in a few minutes. First of all, who translated the Hebrew Bible into Syriac? Was it people who were not Jews? Of course, there were people who knew Hebrew who did that. So they were either they were either Jews themselves or Jewish Christians who translated the Hebrew Bible into Syriac. This demonstrates that there were many Jewish people who spoke the language that we call Syriac. What happened to the to the Syriac-speaking Jews of antiquity? We know that there were Manichaeans who used a kind of Aramaic very close to Syriac, so close that some people just call it Syriac. What happened to the Manichaeans who spoke Syriac? We know that there were polytheists who spoke Syriac too, right? They wrote books. Where are those books? When Syriac speakers began to convert to Islam, before they knew Arabic, they still knew Syriac. I wonder whether there were, but no longer exist, Syriac works written by Muslims, right? We just don't know. But when people convert in their lifetime, they don't automatically pick up a new language and new literacy. These are separate phenomena. So what happened to the Syriac-speaking non-Christians of antiquity, right? This is where we get to what's more or less my main point. It's a matter of cultural heritage preservation. So from the point of view of this conference, and after hearing the addresses of the eminent speakers who preceded me here at this podium, we all know, it hardly needs to be said, that Christians of the Middle East have been dominated demographically by Muslims for centuries, and that this has put and continues to put Christian culture and practices at risk, and sometimes violently, as you know. But we also have to acknowledge that similar processes happened before. Christians drove non-Christian cultures, Syriac-speaking cultures and practices out of existence, exterminating competitor traditions and the peoples who had maintained them. So this process is not unique here, right? This is not unique here. What we have is an institutional funnel, an illusion of hindsight. And this is now the next major important point. The default state of every text on organic materials is ultimately to disappear. Every surviving text not written on a durable substance like stone or metal plates that has not been selected for survival by copying will disappear. Groups that did not create firm social boundaries gradually assimilated. They gradually adopted the other languages of their neighbors, of the predominant cultures in their vicinity. Where groups remained relatively isolated and they did not adopt the languages of the surrounding cultures, then they maintained distinct traditions of their own. This gets actually to the remarks by the Catholicos a moment ago. Preservation must not become isolation. And yet, there are very few examples of cultures that leave isolation, social isolation, and manage to preserve their ancient heritages. So I can give you the parallel, which I discussed in this micro-monograph, of Middle Persian literature. This is a cautionary tale. Those of you who are familiar with the study of Middle Iranic languages, and let's say in this case particularly Middle Persian literature, will know this. Middle Persian was the language of Persians in the time of the Sasanian Persian kingdom, during which also Syriac literature was thriving, especially along the Tigris River. Babylonian Aramaic of Jews was thriving, especially along the Euphrates River, and other languages as well. Those languages that I just mentioned had robust non-state institutions that provided for the copying and the maintenance of ancient texts of their own. When texts did not serve the purposes of their church institutions, they did not copy them. Now, in the case of Middle Persian literature, there's this notion today among my colleagues who study this language that because texts don't survive in Middle Persian, they must just not have had much written literature at all. That is, the Sasanian Persians, alone among all their contemporaries, decided they didn't like written literature. They preserved their texts only orally. They had only oral literature. Now, this makes little sense, and in this monograph I show the copious evidence against the idea. But we have to wonder, what would, if it were not for the preservation of ancient Syriac texts through the intervention of people like Moshe of Nisibis, who preserved most of the 136 Syriac manuscripts dated to the period before 1000 CE, what would we think about about Syriac today? Would we have some kind of language myth that because we didn't have many ancient books, that we would think that Syriac literature was also mostly oral literature, it was mostly oral liturgy or something like that? So we need to look at the institutions that preserve copies of texts in order to understand what does survive, but more than that also, what doesn't survive, right? Every generation that preserves texts is also is choosing texts not to be preserved, choosing texts not to be preserved. And that's a choice that's on us now, too. We're all expending enormous efforts to preserve as many ancient Syriac texts as we can. But what are we missing? What's being neglected? So the linguistic history of Syriac in focus entails several different perspectives that work in tandem. One is, first of all, that Syriac is not a Christian language. It's a language that has been preserved in text by Christian institutions that were not state institutions and that therefore outlasted the overturn of dynasty after dynasty. That through their institutionalization as forms of culture that recur and are replicated over generations, managed to save ancient texts of the kind that we're now interested in. The groups that were most restrictive in their social intercourse with members not of their groups tended to survive. The groups that were most cosmopolitan, one might say, tend to assimilate. And there's that tension between isolation and assimilation. Another point that I made early on is that Syriac never spread. One reads about the spread of Syriac throughout the Middle East. No, we should not. We should not talk about it this way. We have to focus on the people who learned Syriac, who adopted it, who spoke it from childhood, who learned it as a language of erudition in adulthood, who heard Syriac liturgy in the churches or hymns. As the vernacular of Aramaic diverged and Syriac ceased to be a living language in its classically coded form, it takes special effort for others to learn it. This is a problem, right? Every language will disappear. The loss of Syriac text is the default state. If we do nothing, it will all disappear. The heritages that we have are created by human efforts. Primarily in the case of Syriac, the trouble was Arabicization, that is, populations shift to the use of Arabic as opposed to their Aramaic vernacular or in erudite Syriac. And then the cessation of institutions. So at this point, right, there are very few native speakers of classical Syriac in the world. There are some, you may know some, but I see one right here. But what's left without the native speakers? It's just institutions of preservation. So I made these remarks hastily and necessarily so, and I apologize for the slides falling out of sync, but I hope that what I said makes sense and that you still have 15 minutes for a coffee break before the conference proper begins. I thank you for your patience and for your attention.
So wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. So please join me once again in thanking Professor Kevin van Bladel with a new warm round of applause. So we shall now adjourn for the coffee break in the Tachi Ionescu Hall to the left of the auditorium, and then we will continue with the 4 parallel sessions. So in parallel sessions in the halls, which are already in the schedule. Thank you to all. So enjoy your coffee.